This is Party of Six, a new concept in business television. We have a group of 4 business leaders from similar industries getting together for a business lunch, along with 2 CNBC Africa journalists. And we let the cameras roll. There'll be revelations.
It is such a changing environment. It's a major threat affecting retailing worldwide.
Retail is a little bit about reinventing yourself, but it's also about waves. You've got to figure out what to do when the wave's behind you. Can you stand on the surfboard and surf it in and reap the reward? But then you also got to pedal back out again to catch the next wave.
There'll be opinions.
What we're trying to do now is to doggy paddle with the tide against you.
For me, there is a definite flair and success rate where somebody is passionate about what they do.
There'll be controversies.
But what I want to put it to you is that our customer service, however good you are, and however good you are, and however good you are, it's appalling.
People are fighting over 200 million rands.
Welcome to Party of Six. Today, Party of Six is at the magical Zulu-Nyala Large Country Manor. Situated in gracious Chartwell on the outskirts of northern Johannesburg on 13 beautifully landscaped acres, Country Manor is ideal for conferencing, business trips and meetings, functions and pampering mini breaks. With its spacious grounds and luxurious accommodation, Country Manor is the ideal urban getaway to get back to nature. This week, your hosts David Williams and Nozipho Mbanjwa will be chatting to retailers Bruce Rubenstein, CEO of Vestacor, Jackie McGeehan, General Manager of Hyde Park Corner Shopping Centre, Sid Vianello, Retail Analyst, and Greg Solomon, Managing Director of McDonald's South Africa.
Good day everyone, welcome to Zulu-Nyala. My name is Solomon, Exec Chef. For starters, we've got a smoked chicken with raspberry, plums, balsamic vinegar and avocado. For main course, you've got yellowtail with baby potatoes. For dessert, you've got a very rich chocolate marquis. It's a very dense chocolate mousse with fresh berries and mint.
Hi, I'm Jackie McGeehan. I'm the General Manager at Hyde Park Corner Shopping Centre owned by Hyprop Investments. I've been there for 3 years, but I've been in the retail industry as management side for 25 years, and I've even dabbled in having my own retail for 6 years. And I love it.
I'm Greg Solomon. I head up the McDonald's business here in South Africa. Engineer by profession, and I've been with McDonald's forever. We've turned 20 years old in a few months' time. I've been with McDonald's for 18 years, and I feel I've had like 5 or 6 different careers with McDonald's because I didn't join to become the head of the business. I joined to build restaurants, property, building, real estate. And then asked about 8 years ago by the then CEO, would I take a career change? We can talk about that another time as well. But anyway, I did. Plunged into it. You can do it at this table, and I guess I've been in this role for the last 4 years.
I'm Sid Vianello. I've been a stockbroker for about 25 years, researching primarily consumer-related shares. The market changed over that period. When I started, we were generalists, but certainly during the 90s, the industry shifted towards specialization. And obviously, having been involved on the consumer-related side, one had to then choose, well, which way you're going to go, because there are a lot of categories that would be classified as part of the consumer sector, and I ended up in retail.
Okay, so I'm Bruce Rubenstein. I am the CEO of a company called Vestacor. I'm a lawyer by training. I did an MBA some while ago, and at that same time, after practicing for about 15 years as a lawyer, I decided to career change and started as sort of essentially a family business in the retail environment. Also quite why retail and not mining, I guess, because it's probably one of the most complex and one of the simplest things to anticipate. It happens sort of formally and informally. What we're trying to do now is to doggy paddle with the tide against you.
You've got in South Africa, I think it must be one of the best, whether you call it casual dining, takeaway sectors. I mean, the quality and the competition in South Africa seems to me, there can't be many countries where the quality and the range of food available is like it is here.
There's no doubt that it's a hell of a competitive environment. And say this often to my team right now. This is about stealing market share now. This is not necessarily about here comes this massive flame of market share. Everybody's competing for the same customer. You've got to be cleverer, you've got to be wiser, and you've got to look further.
In this particular space, especially around this fast food space where we're seeing competition tightening the market, surely to be innovative and to break away and to steal that market share, you've got to be on to the next. What do you think we should be expecting as South Africans?
Maybe something that makes life even easier for the consumer. A home delivery type service involving fast foods.
Sid and I have never met, but last week McDonald's Woodmead launched its own delivery. And it's unique that he said, but
they fast, these guys.
Yeah, let's
they
move.
are, absolutely.
I told you.
You said it and you've already launched it.
There we done it. But I think beyond delivery, I think it is about innovation. And sometimes I always say to the guys, sometimes innovation is doing new things, but sometimes innovation is doing the same thing differently.
Right.
Okay. Sometimes when the music stops, you stop dancing. Otherwise, you look stupid, and in the format of, say, retail, you can be in trouble. If you continue hell for leather to grow, there are realities on the ground. There are a limited number of people who have disposable income, all that stuff sort of trite, and everybody knows about it. So, you start to work out and do some very sort of anecdotal thinking, and you say, hang on, we're growing space rapidly. We're putting the same things in the same places all the time. What's differentiating? Where do we think this growth is coming from? You just keep cannibalizing. I think that it's probably that drives the so-called international thinking about Africa. They don't live here. They don't really see what's happening here.
The consumer is king, and they will determine the trend. But if you ask them, they won't necessarily know. Henry Ford said, if I did market, they asked Henry Ford about market research. And he said, if I asked them what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse.
One of the challenges our retailers have, especially when they bring international European brands into the country, is the European expectation of growth. It's unrealistic to the South African market. And a lot of times they have huge challenges because internationally they want them to roll out a lot more stores, and locally the businessmen who know the market say there just isn't the demand to have so many stores. And we cannot have as many as you've got in Europe, where in Italy on every corner and in Hong Kong you've got the same store all over the place. The volume of people are just not here.
But what about this big hype about the Africa story and retail and the demographic dividend and Africa being the next...
Never mind that. There is a retailer in Sandton City, I better not say who it is. I asked one of the sales ladies, where do your customers come from? Her answer is, Bruce, I don't know if it applies to Studdefords, 90% of the sales in that store in Sandton City are to African customers, not South Africans, period. 90%. I was astonished.
Let's talk about thinking of Africa and South Africa, and we've got empowerment is an imperative for all companies. The black retailers, are there legendary, I think there are a couple of legendary black retail figures. One thinks of Herman Mashaba from Black Like Me, Tommy Mercato from BB Cash and Carry. These are genuine entrepreneurs who made their businesses when they were at a severe disadvantage with the apartheid. They couldn't get licenses. They weren't allowed to trade in particular areas, and they overcame all those disadvantages.
There's very little empowerment in retail.
So why is that, sir?
You know why? Because there's no legislation that says that there's got to be.
Why not?
I don't know. In banking, there's legislation. In mining, there's legislation that says it's got to be at 25.1, whatever the percentage may be. In retail, there's nothing. One of the reasons given is that, government doesn't really buy much from retail shops.
But I think it's much broader. I think it's very simply a question of regulatory environment. What you've just mentioned, mining, banking, medicines, hospitals, all of those are regulated, highly regulated environment. In other words, government has a lever that can force that kind of structure into being. In the ordinary retail, it's very difficult to force a customer into a store.
Your empowerment in retail would come through entrepreneurs, because they would need to build a big business which would empower them.
And that's why franchising, am I right, Greg? That's why franchising is it's a massive opportunity to to create empowerment of a different kind, but
100%.
very, very successful for very large numbers of people who prepare to work hard.
I don't know the answer, but I was going to ask the table, so what percentage would we guess of retail is entrepreneurs? I think every business morphs into a big corporate. McDonald's started with Ray Kroc as an entrepreneur. So,
Well, take the Visa empire, the biggest retail operation in Africa.
Yeah.
You know, we're taking ShopRite and Pepco and all that. I mean, he didn't start it once again, but he has been the mastermind behind the creation of this gigantic retail empire. Now, he is the entrepreneur.
My sense of entrepreneurial activity in South Africa is being hamstrung. Given what's happening sort of in, I guess, the landlord environment.
If we think of a fish and chips, another, a franchise that the National Empowerment Fund is willing to give you the money up front to help you set up, how attractive is that to a black entrepreneur who could get a stake in a mining company, for example, and see, I mean, if you look at the Sunday papers in the past week, people are fighting over 200 million rands. Those are the kind of figures that black entrepreneurs who have the right connections, if I may call it that, are talking about, as against a couple of thousand that you're making monthly off of fish and chips. So it just doesn't seem as if the returns from retail are attractive enough to black entrepreneurs who have the connections to get bigger returns.
but you see, I think that's where possibly the error in the conversation goes when our entrepreneurs want to be gazillionaires. You know,
But that's the culture that's
where
in the
most
mindset.
Where I'm so proud of most of my franchisees are financially wealthy, even more superior than I am, and so they so deserve it. And I think it's those pockets. I guess where I was going, and I'm probably wrong on the statistics, but I'm going to probably just give it a shot. In an article I was reading about 6 months ago, that the dominant economy in China, let's say 70%, is driven by entrepreneurs. The dominant economy in South Africa is driven by big companies in peri-statals.
So one of our strengths in our shopping centre is that being 46 years old, we have a lot of family-owned businesses, and they are very popular, and they have a huge following because of that one-on-one relationship.
But I think what has happened in South Africa is we've morphed from basically an entire infrastructure and a whole industry of privately owned, entrepreneurial driven businesses, almost at the sort of flick of a coin, into these mega corporates. And in my view, the banks and the landlords and that have now got to a point where the demands upon them in terms of shareholder returns and all those good things are so unrealistic that you can't take a chance on a mom and pop.
But maybe Nozip was right on that big bet. We all want to aspire for that 200 million rand deal, and maybe as South Africans we just don't want to work hard anymore.
Now, both Herman Mashaba and Tommy Makato are so, this is to be expected, they are so against empowerment legislation. They say it's in the way.
Because they did it themselves.
Yeah, so it's natural that they would do that. There's a paradox going on, and that is that the bright young entrepreneurial minds are snapped up by the corporates. Why take the risk with a franchise if you can...
I disagree. I totally disagree. You can never earn as much money in corporate than what a good entrepreneur.
No, but their perception is that it's secure and it's good.
Their perception may be erred, but the money is in entrepreneurs, and it's not about the big corporations. A guy that's got a couple of fish and chips, 3 or 4 McDonald's, that guy or that lady is earning money.
Yeah, but David, it's all about risk.
Yep.
That's why you get the return.
Yeah.
Because you take the risk.
There's that graph, risk and reward.
My friend Joosta once said to me, if you don't want to take risk, gaan sit jou geld in die poskantoor.
You know what I think we should do? I think we each one need to tell an entrepreneurial story.
I suppose it's not really, it goes back a long way, because one of the other businesses I have, which is sadly a dying business, is in the music industry. And I met, I met a guy.
Musica?
No, it's Look and Listen. I was on the aeroplane, and I sat next to a guy who told me he was a civil engineer, which is, of course, highly boring. Sorry, no disrespect to engineers. It's a bit
Hey, but he's in McDonald's now. Eh?
Yeah, he's better now.
engineer that saw the
And
light.
I am a civil engineer, so that's worse.
Anyway, well, I'll tell you why I thought it was boring, and that's exactly what I thought. I thought, well, okay, we talk about engineering. Our lawyers equally boring or whatever. We're going to Canada to one of the record labels. And he said, oh, that's kind of a coincidence. I am too. Okay. And it turned out there's a group of civil engineers who, in their part-time, created a band called the Bare Naked Ladies.
Okay.
And that was his group. And he then was a shareholder in this, and from engineering had taken control of his own label and the distribution. And it was kind of like one of those perfect stories where he starts as a civil engineer with, whatever, and we get to his recording studio, and because he takes us there, and we eventually get to go to a show on Lake Ontario with the waves lapping and your yacht over there, and it was kind of like, and I said to him, but this must have taken ages. He said, yeah, it did about 5-6 years. Wow. It was just, from zero to hero.
You mentioned, before we get on to the next story, Look and Listen. And my impression is of the music world is that they can't control piracy. People getting music and they don't have to pay for it. There are all sorts of ways of doing it.
With free.
This must be one of the things that are eroding the look and listen model.
It's completely eroded. I don't think it exists, and it doesn't exist. The model doesn't exist.
So what are you going to do with the business?
No, well, I don't think there's a hell. I mean, there is a sense of, again, when the music stops, to coin a phrase, and it's not without thought that the likes of HMV and I don't know what, all the Tower Records and all the American brands have gone out of business, quite simply. And the replacement is, I don't know.
There was a young lady who phoned me up. Her name is not Tandi, but I know she's very sensitive about it, but it's similar, and I'll call her that. She phoned me up and she said to me, Greg, you're one of the biggest, if not the biggest franchisor of the world. I own a coffee shop. I'd like to franchise my business. So I said, well, come and see me, and this was about 2 years ago, and she came to see me. She said, you come see me. And it became, when I'm in the West Rand, it became one of my favorite coffee shops, but she'd always be there making it. And cut a long story short, over 18 months, I tried to franchise her business with her. I tried to mentor her to be able to get that going. She opened 2 more shops, and cut a long story short, she closed them down. And I think she's inspirational for me because she knew as an entrepreneur where her skills and levels of expertise were. She's still a very, very successful businesswoman owning, I think, a very good coffee shop, but it's just one. And sometimes knowing yourself as entrepreneurs and knowing who you are as entrepreneurs, knowing what is the definition of success.
I would like to just mention 2 previously disadvantaged initiatives that have actually developed and come into their own in terms of being very successful business operations. One of there is the Artmore collection, which is hand-painted pottery, which is done in the Eastern Cape. And again, it was just done by artists and a woman, and I'm sorry, I don't know all the names and that, because obviously I'm at the very end where they're actually retailing. Charles Gregg in our centre represents them, and is now looking at opening a standalone store. But that is a success story where they're actually now exporting this fantastic quality of completely hand-painted, handcrafted. They do beautiful crocodiles, but it's South African animals, but with a very international painted artistic flair.
Ivan Saltzman. I mean, Ivan and his partners had one pharmacy in the deep south of Johannesburg. And I only tell you the story because I took a hedge fund manager to visit him one day. And we were sitting in his old offices, and he was telling us the story. He said, well, so we decided to open a second store. It was a huge risk. We didn't know what we were in for. We were used to running one single store for 20 years, him and his wife. His wife's also a pharmacist, and they met at pharmacy school.
Mom and pop.
Mom and pop. We then opened the second store. And we managed to overcome all the difficulties, and we suddenly had 2 stores. So then we opened a third store. And suddenly it became easier, from 3 to nearly 80 stores.
Sure.
In, about 15 odd years. That's how long it's taken to get there. But the best story of the lot is, I'm sitting with my hedge fund friend, and she says to him, Ivan, what strategy did you have with regard to product mix, for instance? He said, well, we didn't. We just kind of took every day as it came. I went and bought some product, put it on the shelf. If it worked, fantastic. We bought more. If it didn't work, I discounted the hell out of the thing, got rid of it, and decided we're going to try something else.
But what I want to put it to you is that our customer service, however good you are, and however good you are, and however good you are, it's appalling.
I think it's attitude. I think it's entitlement. I think it's accountability. And I think, you know, we're in the service industry. We need to serve. That's our business. If we didn't want to do that, let's get out and do something else. We talked about innovation. I made a funny statement that it doesn't have to be new. It just needs to be different.
Yeah.
This is the competitive advantage. And it just sits here in front of you. And then it's about consistency.
I'll say about the luxury stores and the luxury offering, their service is exceptional. Look, they are selling a premier brand,
Yeah.
and they are dealing with very, very discerning and demanding clients. But the training that they put in, whether it's sending them over internationally to get trained, etc., it's a completely different experience, completely. And it's certainly in our centre raised the bar and made everybody else have a very careful look at what their service offerings are. But on a smaller basis and operation, you can do that.
I think there is a cultural dynamic to it. You go to London or in any of the major things, and you have that same feeling that the shop assistant is a cajillion miles away in their head, about 1,000 miles away in their body, and you know, standing next to you when they're serving you, and you really are the last thing they want to be doing. Then you go to an American experience in most of the stores there, and the culture is different. I mean, you kind of know it's all a paid thing, like, you know, the guy will carry your suitcase and say have a good day, but he expects something for it. But you kind of think that's okay. You know, if he does
he's
carry
helping you.
Yeah, he is helping me, and the service is good, and I do get what I wanted to get. We haven't I think we still have I don't dare I say, a sort of Anglo-Saxon kind of retail philosophy. We are quite similar to the English.
I've had terribly bad service, but I've also had very good service.
I was going to say that for
It's
me,
right
the
at-
biggest factor is inconsistency.
Total
You never
inconsistency.
know what you're going to get.
A young person coming into the business, what's the advice you give them as to how to contribute to the business? And I mean, I suppose it's about customer service because it's retail. What do you say to them? What is that sentence that you say?
I would, in the retail business, I would say this is a university of life. I think every single transaction that you do with a customer, you learn and you upskill yourself. You know, every single customer is different. This is not something you can go and study and then practice. And I always say, you know, leaders have followers, but leaders have previously followed. And the best retailers that I see have grown through the ranks. No matter how qualified you are, be it an engineer or be it a lawyer, we've done our work, we've swept the floor, we've worked a restaurant, we've dealt with hundreds and thousands of customers ourselves, and so therefore that gives us the trust and respect. But I think really it's to become a great retailer is not overnight.
For me, there is a definite flair and success rate where somebody is passionate about what they do. They're passionate about their brand, number one, because we are very brand conscious. But they're also passionate about their environment, their business, and their people. And I know it sounds a bit cliche, but you have to enjoy what you're doing.
There are two things that retailers do. They do different tomorrow to what they did the day before, always, and they don't look at their toes.
What does that mean?
They
Don't
look
at their
forward.
toes.
They constantly, they never take the lost sale as the end of the discussion. Tomorrow is another sale, tomorrow is another day.
That sounded like an African proverb of sorts. Don't look at your toes, look forward. Like something you'd hear Chinua Achebe say or something.
But ultimately, you are only as good as your last retail experience. The customer's vision will be based on his last retail experience.
Retail is a little bit about reinventing yourself, but it's also about waves. And at this point in time, we're in a trying economy. You've got to figure out what to do when the wave's behind you. Can you stand on the surfboard and surf it in and reap the reward? But then you also got to pedal back out again to catch the next wave. And a business that doesn't have the flexibility, the arrogance, the smarts to be able to do both will have a short span.
I think that retail actually is summarized simply by the partnership that exists between the consumer and the retailer. And until you worked out exactly what that partnership is, it's very hard to succeed.
It is such a changing environment. I mean, you were talking about the economy. One of the biggest single threats, and it's no doubt going to hit some of you, your Stuttaford's operation in time to come, is the online retailing. It's a major threat affecting retailing worldwide.
But to a large
And you-
extent,
and you gotta start
retailers
closing
must
stores.
embrace it and take advantage
No,
of it.
you have
they
to.
mustn't ignore it and think it's going to go away. And it's still quite, I believe, quite a long way for South Africans to fully embrace it. We very much hand, touch, feel, smell, try on at this stage. And they need to build that as part of their sales model.
And certain categories of retailing will react differently. In the furniture business, for instance, that feel and look and what have you is far more, let's say, relevant than, let's say, buying apparel or buying a book.
Thanks to all of you for being here today. Different things. Running a centre full of retailers, a company which has several retailers, and you've got a single-minded, you've got one business, which is a big business. And Sid, who's a veteran at analysing all these businesses, I think it's been fantastic. So thank you very much.